doing some sewing. I got this piece of linen a few months ago from Tessuti, 85 centimeters, not a heaps of fabric. So I thought that maybe I'd throw together a quick pattern hack, and I think that this is probably the easiest pattern hack you could ever do. So join me. I'm going to be using this pattern, which is a Burda pattern that I have never made before. It actually belongs to my mum. This is a really easy hack because it's basically taking a dress pattern and making it into a top. So that's as simple as it gets. Let's get cracking, shall we?
Alrighty, so this is the fabric I'm starting out with. It was a remnant from Tessuti Fabrics, which is kind of like Australia's version of Mood. It's a linen blend with viscose and elastane, and it has a really good drape and body to it. Also, who doesn't love a bargain like this? The pattern is this kind of shirt dress situation, which I'm basically just going to chop in half. I'm going to make the version with this fold back collar if I have enough fabric, because I think collared things just look better on me. And in terms of sewing supplies, I'm just using the usual suspects. Next, I'm cracking open the pattern instructions to see which pieces I'll need since I'm making view A. Conveniently, there's this little diagram which made finding the pieces way easier than reading through a list. I mentioned I've never sewn this pattern before, and it's a Burda, which means it doesn't have seam allowances. Good thing there's a big warning, and my mum also told me about this as well. I'm using the waistline marking as my guide for where I want to crop the dress to. I want the top to be quite cropped as well to sit at my waist. I confirmed this by taking my tape measure and measuring down to that waistline marker and then holding up the tape to my body, and it turns out that the cropped stripy top that I have on is exactly the same measurement, so that's perfect. I'm also going to check against the pattern measurements to double check which size I want to make. Different brands sometimes use different measurements for their sizing, so it's worth double checking. Although sometimes this doesn't really work for me, I don't know. I also tried to lay out the pieces to fit on the fabric, but well,
I lost momentum yesterday, so it's obviously the next day, and I still haven't cut anything out. I was having trouble getting everything Tetrised onto the fabric, but I think I figured it out. There was a piece that I thought I needed that I didn't need. Always read the instructions. Anyway, where I got up to was I was going to show you how I was going to cut efficiently the pattern to have the seam allowance, because Burda patterns don't come with seam allowance. So instead of marking everything out and taking a lot of time to do that, I also don't have a pattern wheel, tracing wheel, or transfer paper. So you can get transfer wheels you can get tracing wheels for transfer paper that have like a 2-track so you can put in the seam allowance as you trace. I've never done that method. I've only seen it done on TV and Instagram, stuff like that. So instead, I'm going to use the method you might have seen me use before, which is the magnet method. I have these magnets, which are each 1/8 of an inch, and I usually sew with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's just how I learned. So what I do is I get my scissors, and you just put the magnet next to the scissor. And then you line up the magnet with the line of the pattern, and then where you're cutting is automatically the seam allowance. So handy, right? So let's cut everything out, and yeah, hopefully this is a quick thing to put together because I really want to get this done.
Cutting out the fabric is always the most time-consuming and tedious part of any sewing project for me, so finding ways to make this process quicker is always excellent. I definitely did not come up with this magnet idea myself, but I can't remember where I saw it, so please just know I didn't invent it. Not every pattern piece has a waistline marker, so I'm just fitting the pieces on at the upper portion and then just guessing the length as I'm cutting stuff out. And just so you know, that comes back to bite me in the ass. I also cut the interfacing I needed. I like to do this after I've cut the fabric pieces, and then rather than repinning the pattern piece, I just use the bit of fabric that's already been cut, and I just cut around that for the interfacing.
So now that I have all my pieces cut out, I'm going to put the interfacing on the ones that need interfacing, and then it's just a matter of following the instructions to make it into a top rather than into a dress. So anything that mentions a dress, I'm going to skip the pockets on this pattern as well because I'm not doing pockets. It's just going to be a top that runs to here. So I'm going to run through that on the machine, and it should be pretty easy to put together. So far it's taken me about half an hour, 45 minutes to cut everything out with moving the camera around and stuff. And so I'll just press on the fusible interfacing and get cracking on sewing.
Another tip for interfacing is to cut it a little smaller than your fabric so that there's no risk of the glue getting onto things that shouldn't have glue, like your iron or your ironing board. I also press the interfacing with the glue side facing towards the fabric, so that also reduces the risk of getting any glue onto the plate of the iron.
It's time to start sewing, but I don't have the patience for French seams today, and I've realized I don't have any dark overlocker thread, so I'm gonna have to go to the shop and get some dark overlocker thread and then come back and start sewing, because this fabric is so fluffy. I need to finish off these seams really well, because otherwise everything that's just gonna be fluff going everywhere. So let's go do that and come back and start sewing. We're going to the shop, but it's illegal for me to film while I'm driving, so you'll just have to manage. I'll just see you when we get there, okay? This is where I got the fabric for this jacket from, so let's go see what they can do to hook me up. I forgot to record anything while I was in the shop, but I did get a falafel wrap for lunch and some baklava for dessert tonight, because we have friends coming over for dinner. Which means I need to finish off this project so that I can tidy up the house and then clean up all the fluff. Whoa! Almost got run over. The life of a YouTuber filming while walking. Anyway, time to go home and finish off this thing so I can tidy up the house. I really want to eat this falafel wrap. I can't wait to get home. I'm hungry. There's a really trippy cloud over there too. Let me show you. Check it out.
This cloud genuinely made the news. Apparently it's a roll cloud, which are quite rare, and it was pretty cool. As well as some lunch, I also got myself a little treat, which is a bobbin case. What an upgrade! I also wanted to share a trick for easily changing overlocker thread. Well done me for this excellently framed shot of me snipping the threads completely out of view. But basically you snip the thread near the spool or near the first guide, and then you just tie the end of the new thread together. And once they're all done, you just hit the accelerator and pull the threads through into the overlocker chain. And Bob's your uncle, you've just changed the thread without rethreading or getting the overlocker instructions out. It's a miracle, and no, I didn't invent this either. I'm mostly just following the instructions from the start, but I hit a snag because I didn't read the fine print and I needed some bias binding for the armholes. I decided to use the leftover from my quilted jacket since I had only a small amount left, which is all I needed. I also realized that there was more fine print about the seam allowances and that different pieces have different seam allowances on these patterns by Burda. Why is that? So you can see me unpicking the bias and starting over, and I figured it would make me laugh about the mistakes I had made and that I had to fix. And if I'm disappearing out of the frame, it usually means I'm just pressing something, but I am too lazy to set up a second camera, and I think you all know how ironing works.
I've gone off piece a couple of times with the instructions on this because frankly I think they're just a little bit complicated, and you know what, if I'm hacking something together then I can just make it up. I've basically put all of the bits together. Now I just need to do the shoulder seams and the little fold over collar. This is quite a complicated dress to make into a top. If you had a different kind of dress that you wanted to make into a top, I recommend one that has a bodice piece and a skirt piece, because then you can just make the bodice part without worrying about the skirt, and voila, you have a top. I'm gonna crack on though, keep going with this because I want to get it finished.
And here is where my laziness at the cutting out phase comes back to bite me. In my haste to get started, I also missed transferring key markings from the pattern. This Burda pattern was just different and I'm unfamiliar with it, but now I know. Also, as I'm happily sewing the beautiful fold back collar lapel situation, I realized that the piece I've cut is not long enough. I literally fished scraps out of the bin and only managed to add just enough to the bottom part of that collar facing. I didn't bother with interfacing it, but I did do a French seam, and in a moment you'll get to see where the project gets exciting, the try-on stage. But before I get to the buttons, I need to level out the bottom edge. I ended up just eyeballing it into the middle using my rotary cutter and then folding that piece back over the rest to be a guide as I'm cutting along. I overlocked that bottom raw edge and then I folded it up twice to catch just the bottom edge of the collar facing because it had ended up quite short. The hem ended up a little bit dodgy on the inside, but I don't mind because it looks okay from the outside. I thought about adding a line of ease stitching, but I couldn't be bothered and I knew that I could live with the insides being a little bit gross because the outside looks fine.
I'm at that stage in a project where I'm so close to finishing that I almost can't be bothered to finish. I just have to put on the buttonholes and the buttons on this top and then it'll be done. But me being me, I just really want to get onto a new project, but I'm gonna force myself to finish this one before I start the next one because I need to practice doing that basically. My desk is a total mess as well, which I don't think is helping me actually think through what I need to do. This is what the top looks like at the moment. The sizing is a bit weird. I made the 38 with the appropriate seam allowances and I just finished off the hem really dodgily as I showed you. I'm remembering now that my mum told me when she made this pattern a long time ago, they didn't have the smaller sizes available in the pattern that she wanted in the pattern when she went to buy it. And so she just made the 38 but didn't add the seam allowances when she cut it out. I think that if I make this pattern again, then I'm gonna do it that way so that it fits a little better because this is quite loose. I also asked on Instagram if I should do 3 buttons or 5 buttons. These are the buttons that I have. They're really cute. They're gold and they have this little detail on them. Everyone on Instagram said 3. I was leaning towards 5 and then I also asked mum and mum reckons 5 as well. So I'm gonna go with 5 or maybe I'll start with 3 and see what it looks like. Go up to 5. I don't know. I'm just trying to find any sort of motivation to get started today.
The tricky thing about having 5 rather than 3 buttons is there's that extra bit of French seamed collar facing that I need to avoid. I really like the look of 5 buttons, so I'm going to try and make the spacing work. When I stitch the buttonholes as well, I'm going to make them horizontal rather than vertical, which is what's shown on most patterns and actual shirts. And I'm doing this so that if some pressure is put on the button, then the buttonhole doesn't gape. This is a tip that I got recently from my mum and I think it's great. Cheers, mum! Someone on my recent video asked me how I make my buttonholes, and I confess, I just do it on my machine. I just use the buttonhole foot and the little tool that it comes with in the sewing machine computer. Handy. There's one final touch on the buttonholes, which is something that I learned from Shelley from Molly Fabric via Instagram, and that is to add some clear nail polish after slashing the buttonholes so they don't fray. This is absolutely genius. I did this on my graduation dress as well, and the buttonholes looked super duper polished and they've held up with washing and everything. And I love this tip. Can't believe I didn't know it sooner. In the end, this project took a little longer than I had hoped, but overall I'm very pleased with how this shirt turned out. I really want to get my hands on some more of that lovely linen fabric because it drapes so nicely and it is really lovely to sew. I love the collar and I'm definitely going to hack this bit onto another garment somehow. This top is certainly roomy though, and I need to really learn to check the finished garment measurements on projects because this happens to me way too often. The dress pattern includes a martingale tie or band at the back, which I think would have helped me solve some of the fit issues, but I didn't have any fabric left. I also managed to successfully dodge that seam or the collar facing extension bit. My buttonholes are holding up so well, and I can't believe I didn't know that little trick earlier about the nail polish. I also can't believe how many more of you are here these days. Stuff's going crazy right now on this channel. All I will say is welcome to Steph, and see you at the next one.